Hello everybody, my name is Ratnos, and today I wanted to make a video about gearing in World of Warcraft Shadowlands. Because this is a topic that there's been some debate on Twitter around. We got PvPers and PvEers kind of flying complaints about their own gearing system and idolizing, the grass is always greener on the other side. So I want to take this time to talk about really the three different sources of gear in Shadowlands, right? PvP, Mythic Plus, and Raid. And the benefits and drawbacks of all three, how different players that focus on just one of those as a game mode will look different from other characters, and really suggestions I would have for this loot system. I want to preface this by saying I'm fairly happy with the Shadowlands loot system as it stands now. There are some pain points. I think that Raid, PvP, and Mythic Plus each have, little things about their loot system that make it that could be improved, right? And largely that could be improved by taking ideas from things that have been implemented for the other types of the game. But by and large, I think that the loot system has moved in a good direction. I think that loot's feeling meaningful, it's feeling impactful, and we're kind of in this situation where there's a lot less items being thrown at us than in previous expansions, which means there's kind of a withdrawal period from that, BFA, Legion, loot explosion. There are a lot less items just available. So let me start by saying what my gear is looking like on my main character. My character is now item level 220, which is pretty sweet. I have killed 19 mythic raid bosses here, done 4 heroic clears, 4 heroic full clears, done a lot of dungeons. I've done a lot of PvP as well. I've gotten PvP up to 2100 for PvP items, and that is something that I don't normally do. I did that I think twice in BFA out of the 4 seasons, so I guess half the time in BFA I PvP'd for gear. This time it seems like it's almost impossible to avoid doing that, though, because let's take a look at where my items and where they came from. PvP item, Mythic Plus end of dungeon item, bind on equip from the auction house, PvP item, bind on equip from the auction house, PvP item, Mythic Plus end of dungeon, legendary, PvP item, actual Mythic Raid loot. This is my one actual Mythic Raid loot that dropped from a raid boss. Heroic BOE, so from the auction house. End of dungeon loot from Mythic Plus. BOE from the auction house. This is a weekly box, but it is a raid item, so call it a raid item, I guess, as well. And Mythic Plus end of dungeon. So we're looking at, 4 end of dungeon rewards from M+, a bunch of PvP items, including 2 of those PvP items are from weekly Great Vaults, and 1 Mythic Raid item from a Great Vault, 1 Mythic Raid item from an actual raid boss. So I don't think that there's necessarily anything inherently wrong with this. It is a little bit weird how much of my gear is from PvP, given that I'm a player who generally would prefer to be doing PvE and stuff. But I don't think that it's actually bad for somebody, in my position, right, where I'm just trying to get the best gear possible. I'm going to do all forms of game content. I think that people kind of would describe this gearing as like a PvE geared character or a PvP geared character. Both PvEers would look at this, people who just want to do M+ would look at this and be like, oh, look at all this PvP gear. And PvP players who only want to do PvP would look at this and be like, look at all this Mythic Raid item, look at all these BOEs and stuff. And I think that that's a mischaracterization of what this character is that we're looking at. This character is the same character that I played every season for the past, during BFA, all of BFA, which is all content, right? I'm doing all content. I want the best gear. I want it as early as possible because I'm trying to kill Sergeant Athreus, in the first month or two of the raid being out. And so this character is going to have the best options from both PvP, PvE, and M+ available. And so I don't think that you want to look at this and be like, okay, this is the problem, right? Because I don't think it is. I think that you need to instead examine, all right, what are the cases where somebody only PvPs, right? So if somebody was only a PvPer, if they didn't want to set foot inside any PvE content, they would still have the legendary. They could still buy the auction house BOEs, which, by the way, 4 auction house BOEs being the best way to gear your character is, to me, the most offensive part of the gear system that we have right now. And then you would have mostly 184 items, right? All of your gear would be 184, except for the pieces where you could buy conquest items and your weekly Great Vault items. So PvPers, for the first, 8 weeks, 9 weeks of the expansion, would be looking at a baseline of 184 across their items, with some 226s if they're able to get 2100, which presumably the kind of PvPers we're talking about could do that, right? And that is a system where they look at that and they're like, all right, why are we stuck with 184s as our baseline when Mythic Plusers can get 210s in all their items on the second week, right? And so a Mythic Plus only character, they're going to have 210s on all their items, but they're going to have half as many 226s as the PvP only player, right? If you do Mythic Plus only, you're getting you're getting 210s at the end of dungeon. You could fill out your whole slot if you're doing 15 keys, or 207s for 14s and 13s as well would make up a lot of your items potentially, depending on the situation. But then you're only getting 226s from the Great Vault, right? You don't have a conquest currency, and so you're looking at Mythic Plusers shooting to 210, and then still hanging out, being short of the thing. Then raiders, people look at raiders, and everybody, I think, would describe this as like raiding gear. But really the thing is that just the raiding characters are the characters that are also getting the gear from PvP and the M+. Because the raid itself is also not dropping very many items. The raid is dropping 3 items per boss on Mythic difficulty, which means that you need to do, 7 bosses to get as many items as everybody's just going to open in their Great Vaults each week. To get 21 items across your 20 players. And those items are frequently neither upgrades nor tradable, because, I could drop there are several trinkets in the raid before I got my 226 trinket that could have dropped for me that wouldn't have been tradable, but also I wouldn't have equipped because they're garbage trinkets. Or there are these slots where you can get an item level upgrade, but because it's not tradable, it might not be an ideal drop. All of that being said, it's good loot, right? The best loot is to do everything. But it's not like raid is in a particularly sweet place either, in terms of if you just raided, your items would be pretty bad. I don't even know, you'd probably have mostly, assuming you could not set foot in M+ or PvP, right, to make a hypothetical comparison to our PvP only player and our Mythic Plus only player, our raid only character would probably be in mostly 200 normal items, 213 heroic items, with a couple of Mythic pieces on. I mean, you wouldn't even be able to kill that many Mythic bosses with that baseline of loot, right? All of the raiding characters we're talking about, that both PvPers and M+ers are complaining about, have got a bunch of 210 and 207 M+ items, and have got a bunch of 226 PvP items, right? And they're using that to then kill some raid bosses and get a couple more raid items. But really, we're talking about characters as the kind of hated group that everybody dislikes. These are characters that are doing everything. So let me talk a little bit about the ways that I would change players' gear for doing only one form of content. Because I don't think it's bad that you have better gear if you do all 3 forms of content, but I think that the gap is quite large right now, and I think that the gap could do with being narrower. So first thing I would do, I'd remove the stupid BOEs. BOEs are dumb. Being able to spend, 4 million gold on the auction house, I maybe wouldn't have as much of a problem with it if you couldn't just whip out your credit card and do it with WoW tokens, and I think that does compromise a little bit of the game that's going on here. So BOE's out, whatever, up the loot a little bit to compensate for them if necessary. Let's talk about how I would improve the lives of each content-only player. So the raid-only player, I think, is... it's a weird situation because there are so few people in that spot. There are very few people that are only gearing with raid, but I do think that should maybe be a little bit more supported than it is right now. I think that one way of doing this would be to have an incremental currency that drops. Instead of getting these 35 anima drops when you kill a boss, which feels really bad, I think that some kind of incremental currency that you could use to buy maybe 213 items from, once you've accrued 10 bosses worth of it, would go quite a long way towards making it not feel like an entire heroic raid gave you nothing. Because with the loot drops the way they are right now, right, where you have something like a 15% chance to get loot from any given boss, there are so many people in any given heroic raid that drop 0 items from their entire endeavor, right? And, their Great Vault is full of 3 213 choices from raid if they've done a full heroic clear, right? And doing 1 plus 14 key is a far better option than those would be, right? So I think that we want to maybe target those sorts of players, target those heroic-only players, and give them a little bit more of a way to get the items that they need, and that fill the slots that they are missing, which I think is one thing that PvP is doing really well. So the PvP-only players have this really cool currency vendor where they can just go and buy whatever slot they're missing, and that's really awesome. But PvP-only players aren't getting item level 200 pieces. Now, you could just make it so that there's going to be a renown upgrade that we'll get that will do, unrated PvP item level, and that'll come along, but if it comes on week 10 of every patch, is it really relevant for these sorts of players? Getting stomped by players that are geared in all 3 forms of content? for the first 10 weeks of the patch. Most players front load most of their gameplay into the start of a patch, so if the patch's gearing system is only good at the end, it's not a good gearing system. That's something we learned with the corruption vendor as well, was that even though corruption, maybe got to a reasonably okay place after a couple months, the damage was done. And so here's what I would do with PvP. I think that making it so you can buy the honor upgrades and get them to 184 right now is pretty reasonable, but I think they should bring back end of match loot that's like 200. Right, just eye level 200, end of match items start dropping, and that way if you're actually queuing, a lot of PvP, you can actually get your gear up to a reasonable baseline. Maybe even high, maybe 207, 213 would be things you could consider for the loot rewards from that. And then finally, M+ only players. I think M+ only players would also benefit from a sort of conquest-style currency. Something that lets you buy specific items in specific places like PvP players have. Maybe one that, like in PvP, you need to get to 2100 in order to purchase item level 226 items. Maybe you need to clear all the 15s before you can actually use that currency to upgrade or purchase items. Maybe you use it to upgrade your end of dungeon items up to 220 or 226, 223, something like that, based on the highest level dungeons. You've cleared all 5 dungeons at 14 level, all 8 dungeons at plus 14, all 8 dungeons at plus 15, those sorts of things let you make the upgrades then with that currency. One thing that you do need to watch out for is I'm suggesting buffs to all 3 forms of, one type of content only player. And these are buffs that I'm suggesting that are aimed at those players, but it's important to watch out that, then my character, right, which is doing all 3, doesn't become like turbo OP. So maybe you can do something where, there's a shared cap between the PvP and PvE systems where, you can use the Conquest to upgrade your gear, you can use the M+ currency to upgrade your gear, you can use the Raid currency to upgrade your gear, but you can't do all 3, right? You can only do one of those 3 per character or something like that, Maybe it's just a shared currency, right? Maybe Conquest just drops from end of dungeon and from PvP and from Raid, right? And you can use Conquest based on the number of raid bosses you've killed, or based on the number of high-level dungeons you've done, or based on your PvP rating to upgrade items. It doesn't slot perfectly into the current existing system, but I do think that that's an important thing that they should make sure to do as well, because what I want to suggest is bringing up the relative power level of, the one form of content-only gamer, not so that it's caught up to me, because I want to keep farming those guys in threes. But I wanted to get closer, right? I wanted to get a little bit closer so that they can, people right now that are, doing M+ only or PvP only and are eye level 205 could maybe be 210, 215. And then if you want to get 220 on the 3rd week of the patch or 4th week, whatever it is now, you need to do all 3 forms of content. I'm fine with that. So whatever system changes they make, I do think it's important that they watch out for making me any stronger. One thing as well that's making me strong is those stupid BOEs I was talking about. I've got 3 mythic and 1 heroic BOE on, and those are huge. Those have been dramatically enhanced in terms of their importance this patch compared to previous patches because of the lack of items that are dropping, right? There's so few items that are dropping that the BOEs become even more valuable. In fact, my raid team, we've been doing off-night BOE farms in Mythic, and that's been, by far, we get more items from spending 4 hours doing like 4 or 5 resets of Mythic Nathria BOE farming than we do from like clearing Mythic bosses, right? We do a BOE farm and we get 3 or 4 BOEs per full clear of the trash in Nathria from wherever we had our lockout at. And that's like 2 Mythic bosses worth of loot with the added liquidity of being able to auction house whatever we don't need. So, that is stupid and shouldn't be a thing. That's really dumb. So BOEs are the only thing that I'm really confident about here. Anyways, those are just my thoughts on the rest of the gearing situation here in Shadowlands. By and large, I'm pretty happy with it. I'm pretty happy with how items feel. I'm pretty happy with how good upgrades are feeling again this expansion. I'm pretty happy with how permanent certain items feel. I have items on my character that are forever items, right? These items are not going to be replaced pretty much under any circumstances. This item absolutely, is best in slot in all ways. And other items that I would need to see 10 weeks down the line, a leech upgrade in the same slot before I would actually upgrade any of these. So these are effectively items that I'm keeping forever as well. And that's something that you didn't get under Titan Forging and Corruption, right? Under Titan Forging, you never had a forever item unless it was like Max Titan Forged, right? And that was so rare. You saw one or two of those per patch or per expansion, depending on how much you played. So all in all, I'm positive on this system. I think it's good. I think the Great Vault is a great way. I think the Great Vault does a good job of even equalizing, such that somebody who does only one form of content gets pretty much the same out of the Great Vault as somebody who does all three. You know, choosing one item from 3 slots versus choosing one item from 9 slots is really not that much worse. And I think that that is a great model. But I do think that there are ways in which each of these 3 gearing tracks could benefit from lifting a little bit of the others. And I do think a slight buff in terms of how easy it is to gear from just one form of the game would be warranted. And this is as somebody who does all 3, right? I'm not in that position. I'm not somebody who's just an M+ only player. I'm not a raid only player or a PvP only player, but I do think that those players shouldn't be penalized quite as much as they are now. Of course, a little bit, but not quite as much as is right now. Anyways, those are my thoughts on gearing. Let me know what you think in the comments below. This video's gone a little rambly, but sometimes you get rambly videos. Hope you liked it. Check out my Twitch stream, twitch.tv/Dratnos. Feel free to come in there and say, hey, I watched your most recent video. You know, here's my thought, right? Instead of, if you see I'm live, you just say it there, and whatever I'm doing, I'll answer, even if I'm raiding, because I'm a tank. So it's real easy. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.